I'm sure John McMullen had a delicious media meal up at the NovaCare complex today, but the thing I really want to talk to him with first and foremost is this was supposed to be a light 10-10-10. What do you mean people are fighting, John?
Yeah, well, that tells you we're in the dog days of camp. So you're right. I mean, that's part of the problem. Andre Dillard is treating practice like it's real. And some defenders got upset today, starting with Jonathan Cyprien, and then the bigger fight was with Derek Barnett. So much so that Doug Peterson had to go over after practice, Howie Roseman as well, to sort of calm Andre Dillard down. Yeah, and Malcolm Jenkins kind of explained it, Jason Peters as well. At this time, people start to get on people's nerves, and you see that kind of stuff happening.
Visibly emotional, like tears for Dillard. Is that something you normally see on an NFL practice field?
No, it's not, and that's where you start to wonder. He's a rookie, and it's a grind. And that's where I often talk about fans and how they project players and how they look at players, and they never look at them as human beings, to be real about it. And they think they're these robots that just roll out every day, and they're supposed to not have other issues. And clearly something was bothering Andre Dillard today. He didn't want to talk about it, but yeah, I mean, I'd use visibly emotional, but Doug told him to put his helmet on. Because there's a lot of media there, obviously, and obviously there are some pictures out there, so you can judge on your own.
Right, he takes his helmet off, and Doug gives him the first piece of veteran advice, which is, dude, put your helmet back on, or else this is gonna go viral, or this is gonna be out there. You know, one of the knocks on Dillard was that maybe he wasn't as nasty a player as people thought he should be. Is that reading too much into it to see that Barnett might have gotten the better of him in one practice, or are we to take the other spin and say, well, good, rather him have the meltdown on the practice field than lining up against an NFC opponent?
Well, I think the knock on him as not being nasty comes from the fact of where he played in college and the fact that they never ran the ball. So all he was doing is pass protecting, and he's very good at it. And that's the ironic part, is he's been very good in camp. He's largely been dominating, and that continues mainly with the second team. But the Eagles have Jason Peters on a pitch count, and he gets a lot of work off the time, so he's had plenty of first-team reps as well. He's performed very well. And today, I mean, Cyprien was mad because it was a 10-10-10 practice, and he basically bulldozed him at the second level, and you're not supposed to do that. And then Barnett and him got into it. They were pretty chippy throughout the whole practice. And again, this is not the practice you're supposed to be that way. So just by the way Doug and Howie handled it, it was clear that they felt that Andre didn't understand how this practice was going to go, and it wasn't the veterans. And that's Cyprien and Barnett, and that should be pretty obvious because they understand what a 10-10-10 practice is.
So if it wasn't a 10-10-10 practice, would this be viewed as maybe a little bit differently? Like, once this is all said and done, are there players, like, shaking their head? Or because all the comments you see after something like this happens is it's bound to happen. Jenkins said that, and it's football. Jason Peters said that. So it's like they're not trying to blow it up to the media, but do you think behind closed doors they're like, Andre, come on, man, what are you doing? Or on the flip side, is it viewed as like, all right, this kid's got fire. He may not supposed to be bulldozing people, but we like his energy?
Well, I think more so the latter, to be honest, depending on if there's not a bigger issue, because he did get emotional about it. So I do think the team has to weigh that as well. If you're just talking about a typical fight, yeah, I mean, at this point in camp, you're bound to see one. There's been a few dust-ups. Casey Tucker, who's now on injured reserve with a concussion. Sharif Miller got into it. But this was a little bit more today. But if it were a padded practice and, Cyprian would have been ready, and he probably wouldn't have got bulldozed. So I think that was the bigger issue from the Eagles' perspective. It's like, understand what we're doing here. This is not the time to go beat up your teammates.
So, the weekend has come and gone. It's Monday. Let's get back to some other stuff here. The quarterback position, I heard that's a position that's talked about every once in a while, especially after Sudfeld going down. You tweeted out a picture of Clayton and Cody. So any news and notes on the quarterback position? How have the healthy quarterbacks in the red shirts looked maybe today or, since Sudfeld went down?
Well, it's Carson, which is good. Cody and Clayton, which is not so good. So, beyond the 3 C's, I don't see a lot to link the 3 together. They're not similar. And look, this fan base has been spoiled by having a good backup quarterback. Most teams don't have good backup quarterbacks. So the goal is always to get the starter healthy and playing 16 games, and that's the Eagles' hope. And I understand people are concerned about it because of Carson's injury history, but I got news for you. If it's Nate Sudfeld or Cody Kessler or insert name, Josh McCown, Colin Kaepernick, any name you want to throw out there, Carson's not out there, the Eagles are in trouble.
What do you think their philosophy is behind closed doors? Is it the same philosophy that we're hearing? Like, sure, most teams don't have a good backup quarterback. Most teams don't have Nick Foles there to lead you and get hot and go on the streak and the run that he did go on to win the Super Bowl. But they like having multiple running backs. They like having depth in almost every key position. Quarterback is one of the key positions. Do you think that they're low-key trying to bring someone in here to fill a void since Sudfeld went down, or they're just good with what they got?
Well, I always say, and we saw Howie pick up Eli Harold, defensive ends, typical August trade. Always makes some kind of trade in August. It's usually a player-for-player trade. So he's always trying to get better. But I think I was talking with Pete over the weekend. If he can get a young quarterback the Eagles believe have potential to develop down the road, I could see them making a move. I don't think it would be a splashy move. It's not going to be a big name. But I explained a veteran quarterback before week 1 means he's vested. And what that means is you have to guarantee all 17 weeks of his salary. And Nate Sudfeld expected to be back, worst case scenario, by week 4. So you're not going to do that. They're not going to bring in a veteran before week 1. They're not going to guarantee a salary for 17 weeks. Cody Kessler, on the other hand, is not vested. This is his 4th year. You have to play 4 years to be vested. So they could cut him in week 2 or week 3, and that would be it. So there's a salary cap part to this as well. And, again, the Eagles are not going to guarantee some veteran guy coming off the street who doesn't know the system, who's going to be a third-string quarterback when Nate Sudfeld comes back. They're not going to pay him 17 weeks of salary.
97.3 ESPN Eagles Insider. Yes, he was on with me on the Pete Thompson show on Saturday. That I saw his tweet that he was on Sunday as well, 7 for 7. You're an Iron Man, John, talking Eagles all the time. And, of course, we're going to keep going to that well and going to you. So let's ask this question about who was there and who wasn't. Because one of the things I always both find amusing and challenging for you is to try and play Columbo of like, all right, well, that guy's not practicing, but is he really hurt? Or is this a Veterans Day situation, for example, like Jason Kelsey, who did not practice today, but yet it was just a Veterans Day kind of thing? How do you determine that? When do those answers? And who was off the field today for not to be worried about, and who was back?
Well, it was interesting because the two veteran days today were Rodney McLeod and Jason Kelsey, but they were both, in Jason's case, he was wearing a wrap on his right leg, so clearly something was bothering him. Otherwise, it wouldn't be wrapped. But he was on the field. He was watching practice. So I don't think it was too serious. From Rodney's perspective, he had a bit of a scary moment at the end of practice on Sunday. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside kind of rolled up on his leg, and obviously he's coming off the torn ACL and MCL. So I think there was some concern with him. And the Eagles at times are not exactly above board with these types of things, but saw Rodney in the locker room after practice, said he plans to practice tomorrow. So he seems fine as well. So those were the two key ones. And the other injuries, we all know, and it's a very, very long list. The latest add to Lane Johnson, Dallas Goedert, they're basically shut down. And they're not going to play in the preseason any longer, and the goal for them is week 1.
Dallas Goedert with the calf, Lane Johnson with the knee. Yeah, you're right. We know about Sudfeld. We know about a bunch of people out there. Jalen Mills, he's a long way back from returning. But would you say that it's optimistic that there have been more players that have been able to make appearances and come back, or do you think the injury, like where do you think the balance lies? Are they in trouble with injuries at this point, or do you think that they've been able to mostly remain trouble-free?
Well, I think a lot of it is they're being ultra cautious, and we've talked about that a lot as well. And this team has shifted gears in the preseason, and they don't consider the games an environment for the veterans and the key players. It's more for the younger players. So they're being very cautious for anybody of value that has anything wrong with them, and that's an example of Lane Johnson. I mean, I just know Lane personally. If this were a regular season game, he'd probably be playing. That's just his mentality. That's just the way he is. And they're going to hold him out, as I said, for the next 3 preseason games, just to be ultra cautious. Same thing with Dallas Goedert. And then you talk about the more serious injuries. We know Nate and Camus are going to be injured into the season. Those are more significant. But there is some good news. Derek Barnett, who we just talked about, getting in the fight. And one of the reasons I think the Eagles were upset at Dillard is the fact that he just got back to team drills over the weekend. He's coming off-season shoulder surgery, actually in season, which shut down his season last year. And the last thing you want to do is get him hurt in a stupid fight at practice. So that was one of the concerns with that. That's a positive. Ronald Darby it was back in 7-on-7s for the first time Sunday, and he's moving really well. His goal is week 1, and he'll be the starting right corner. I hate to tell everybody, prepare for it. It's coming. He's going to be the right cornerback, not Rasul Douglas. So there is good news as well with those two particular players.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up, because I think when you and I talked right as camp was breaking, like maybe day 1, day 2 of camp, I asked a pretty, what I thought was innocent question of which side of the ball had more question marks, and you said defense, and then you even went a little deeper and said defense, but specifically linebacker/secondary. And so have any of those questions been answered for you, especially like with the secondary, as you write on our website, 973ESPN.com, about Sidney Jones back handling the outside work, or Avonte Maddox in the slot? I mean, it looks like they're trying to tinker with what works and what's the best.
Yeah, and Jim Schwartz is a slave to that kind of thing, and he says he rotates, and he's going to rotate to the bitter end. Now, tomorrow is the last technically training camp practice, but the Baltimore Ravens are in for joint practices in advance of the Week 3 preseason game. So we get, as the media, we get to watch those 2 practices as well in a full fashion. Once we're kicked out and once we're in regular season mode and we can only watch the first 15, 20 minutes of practice, I have a feeling Jim's going to stop that. And he's already made his decision, but he doesn't want to let us know he's made that decision. Ultimately, I think Sidney will be on the outside. Avante will be in the slot, but he's been rotating them every single day, and it's not going to stop until it's closed to the media. I guarantee it.
John, you just mentioned the joint practice with Baltimore for Week 3, heading into that Week 3 matchup. So I kind of want to ask you here, what is their game plan for this week leading up to the second preseason game? Is it similar to the one we just saw in Week 1? And does it transition a little bit when they prepare for Baltimore coming in for a joint practice? And Week 3 has always been that week where that's the quote-unquote starters week. So after this game against the Jags, does it really go up one gear to any type of gear? Or what's their game plan?
Yeah, well, they don't have any game plan for preseason games in Week 1 or Week 2. So there's no game planning for the Jaguars. They'll just work on their schemes and evaluation, and they want to see what the players do against other NFL players they don't see every day. But there's no specific, the Jaguars are weak at a certain position, we're going to attack that. There's no studying of that. There's none of that. Traditionally, Week 3 is the dress rehearsal game, and that's when you do prepare like it's a regular season game. And Doug has said, the players have told us he does want to get the starters a little bit of work, but he's also told us that because the Ravens are in for those joint practices, the starters are going to get a ton of reps in the week leading up to the game. So it's not going to be a typical Week 3 preseason game where a lot of coaches would play their starters into the third quarter. And the theory there is you prep for the game. You want to make sure they're used to going in the locker room and then coming out of the locker room and ramping up to play again. So that was the old school thought. It's shifting, and it's shifting dramatically, seemingly more and more teams. They're not going to play as much as they normally would, but I do expect them to play a little bit, the healthy ones. But I'll also say if you have a hangnail, you're not playing.
Right, and I that was completely botched by me. What I meant by game plan was their approach in the week leading up to those games. Like, how much does it differentiate? But nonetheless, you seem to answer it there for me. So is there any type of Foles-Wentz preview that we should be getting ready for?
Get ready to not see them. I don't know. From Jacksonville's perspective, they might play Nick for a series or two, maybe even a quarter. The more I think about it, I mean, Lane Johnson's not going to play. Jason Kelsey had a wrap on his leg, as I mentioned today. Jason Peters, I don't think he's going to play. So you start to ask yourself, well, do you want Carson Wentz playing if the starting offensive line is not out there? I don't think so. So the more I think about it, I don't think Carson's going to play either. And we'll see. I mean, it wouldn't stun me if they put him out there for a series and got him out as quickly as possible. But if Lane Johnson and Jason Kelsey and Jason Peters aren't out there, and Brandon Brooks obviously is not going to be out there, I don't want my starting quarterback out there, especially when my backup's already got his wrist in the sling. It doesn't make sense to me.
John McMullen with us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Another article you have up on our website right now, John, is you mentioned Lane Johnson not being out there, but that creates an opportunity for the project that may no longer be a project and may be growing into somebody they can count on. That's Jordan Mailata. I guess you talked to Stout a lot about him, and his name's come up. What's the latest on the former rugby player turned Philadelphia Eagle?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the Eagles' perspective, and that's what I wrote about, it's always been a long-term project, and I think there was some unfair hype from Brian Baldinger specifically and Ross Tucker who are former NFL offensive linemen, so people take them seriously, and understandably so. But from the Eagles' perspective, I mean, this guy had never played a down of organized football, and he's trying to be an NFL left tackle. There was no intent to get him geared up to play last season or even this season. From their perspective, it's always been a 3-year project, and they're hoping he could be the swing tackle by year 3, and that's 2020, and I think they're on line for that. I think the first step was they decided his natural position because of his size and his wingspan and his athleticism was left tackle. So they let him concentrate on that. He didn't play anything else during his rookie season when he was eligible to practice. And this year they wanted to cross-train him more, and he's played a lot at right tackle, and he'll probably start the rest of the preseason at right tackle. And then year 3, again, they would hope he would be the backup to the starters, which at that point would be, in theory, Lane Johnson and Andre Dillard at left tackle. That is the plan. From their perspective, it's still going well. From other people's perspective, Baldy put him in the Hall of Fame, and they expected more. So I don't think that's fair for Jordan, who, as I said, I mean, he didn't even know what football was growing up on Australia until someone saw him and saw his athleticism, his size, and his strength, and said, wow, you could be an NFL left tackle. He decided to give it a try. It's pretty amazing how far he's come, but he's still got a long way to go.
The Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN, Johnny Mack with us. So last technical day of training camp, but the future, the Ravens come in. You're going to get to see a little bit of that. But as we look forward here, last technical day, then what do they do once they move past tomorrow's last practice? It goes into like game week situation each week, closed to meet outsiders and everything?
Yeah, it's closed to outsiders. We get to watch, as I said, the first 20 minutes, usually individual drills, and then we get kicked out, and because everything's very clandestine. And I use that jokingly because God forbid if we saw a group install and sent it to the Dallas Cowboys, the season would be over. But, yeah, the Eagles aren't the only team that operate like they're the CIA, but training camp has got smaller and smaller. And, yeah, once tomorrow is over, once really the Ravens are gone, it's regular season mode from a practice standpoint. And that means even the media only sees that first 15, 20 minutes.
15 to 20 more than most people see. That's why we count on you, our 97.3 ESPN insider, John McMullen. Johnny, thank you for the time, buddy, and we'll catch up with you again tomorrow in the 4 o'clock hour for our football at 4 o'clock time. Thanks, John.
All right. Thank you, guys.